Okay, welcome to this week's episode of KUDEN Radio. Sorry, my throat's a little bit dry. Anyway, Dai-Shihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts. Most of you guys already know that. If you're new, welcome. I appreciate it. Aircon kicked on in my office. Sorry about that. Anyway, all right. So before we dive in, I want to set the stage for today's episode with a quick thought. I don't know, maybe it's not a quick thought. I've been thinking about this for the last couple of days. So I think we all know this, but I still feel the need to say it. That there is a big difference between reading the lessons of ninjutsu, of ninpo, or hearing Hatsumi Sensei or one of the other now soke or master teachers discussing it in a video, on YouTube or something, or I don't know, maybe you've been in a class or a seminar or Taikai, Daikomyo-sai, whatever, and heard them say it. But there's a huge difference between knowing those lessons and actually living them. I mean, we all know that, right? And unfortunately, I have seen far too many people who can recite the philosophy. They can, uh, regurgitate or recite things that Hatsumi Sensei has said, right? Who know the right words, but, and this is the sad part, right? Who act nothing like warriors in their daily lives. So, here in a little bit, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened at a seminar that I attended years ago. I mean, this was like a punch to the throat. It was so contrary to what I was used to the way I was brought up and nurtured, by my teachers in this art, right? Um, it really drove this thing home, right? And I want to tell you why it was so painful, mentally, physically, right? Painful for me to witness, right? I'll talk about that in a bit here, but for now, keep this in mind. Knowing about ninjutsu isn't the same thing as embodying it. Right? Knowing a bunch of techniques, even having decent taijutsu, it's not the same thing as embodying the art as a warrior, as a person, right? So it's that gap, right? This is what we're going to tackle today, right? And as always, if you get value from this episode, do us a favor, right? Like, subscribe, you know the drill, right? So we'll talk about this and more as soon as we get back.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
All right, so let's officially kick this thing off. Again, Dai-Shihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts, and I've got Sensei Alexander, James, to everybody who knows him really well. He's in the wings, so I'll do what we always do. James, who do we have on? We'll do our little welcome thing. It's kind of like, Dai-Shihan Rogers. Welcome to my neighborhood. Or not. Anyway, so that's it. That's the only humor you're going to get for the day. So, all right. Anybody sign in? I'm not seeing
so far. Maury's on.
Okay.
I'm going to say good evening.
Good evening. Or good morning or good afternoon or wherever people might happen to be around the planet. Okay, so I'm sure people will keep filtering in. And I do really, really, really want to dive into this topic um, for this episode. Um, but there's something really cool that I found out today from a couple of sources. So I want to, well, I don't know, it's not gloating, but I do want to highlight this because James and I work hard on these things, and my guy Terrence, who spends a lot of time uh, pulling clips out of these different episodes, these are Whiteboard Wednesday and whatnot, so that we constantly have lessons out in front of everybody. I mean, I get it. Not everybody can or is willing to sit through an hour and a half podcast, or sometimes they're 2 or 2.5 hours long. Um, and so we try to like pull little snippets and whatnot that, people can still get value from, and then maybe jump to some other things. And then as we're seeing now, and as we often see from episode to episode, uh, we're looking at a certain number, right, of people that are on live. Um, but then we'll go over and take a look at views on YouTube, and it's a certain number. Um, I mean, if we jumped around to every podcast directory that we're on, James, how many would we be jumping around? Well over 100, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're on the big ones, Spotify and all those things, but there's too many for us to just run around, and that kind of plays into the topic for tonight. We're talking about we're going to be talking about chaos and life and self defense and combat and all those things, being messy, right? There is a kind of a level of that, right, in us trying to figure out where we are and what's going on. But that being said, before we get into the meat of the training, there is this thing that I do want to share with you. Okay, and again, James hasn't even seen this yet, right? At least I don't think he has. Um, James, where do you think we are in the rankings when compared to or against other self defense, martial arts, or ninjutsu specific podcasts?
Well, I don't know that there's how many of them are out there.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Well, to give you, for instance, right now, as far as I know, and there may have been, more started today or this week or whatever, but the latest numbers that I have is there's somewhere around 498 or 499 million podcasts.
Sure.
Most of them got fired up during COVID because I guess people had no place to go and decided, well, shit, let me do a podcast. And guess what happened right after COVID was over? Yeah, half of them went away, but they're still out there, that people can bump into. But either way, yeah. So, um, you know, you think, I don't know, top 100, top 500, top. What do you think? I guess you've helped me get this stuff out there. What do you think?
I would I would hope at least top 100, given the fact that we have so many episodes. I would think compared to other ones, at least has
Hmm.
what little bits I've seen here and there, like we've talked about before, tend to start and then fizzle out fairly quickly.
Hmm. Yeah. So the list that I found and the reports and whatnot from where I could find them um, did not take into consideration. There were mentions of, but did not take into consideration the number of episodes or even the number of reviews.
Mm.
Okay. So where we're positioned on one list, we only have like 6 reviews, right? I understand people are busy and whatnot, and tracking us down in every given place and dropping a review is just not. easy. But in this one particular big directory site, we had 6 reviews. We're pancaked between 2 other ones, with reviews in the hundreds. As a matter of fact, the one right after us, I think, had, I don't know, 140 some reviews, so way more than us. So that wasn't even a factor, right? But it was, yeah, it was interesting. So I'm going to pull up a couple of these things, and we'll see what you think. All right. So let's start with the best 100 martial arts podcasts as reported, because not everybody, like, what I did find was that Spotify and Apple Podcasts and whatnot, they don't have a lot of niche reporting functions for whatever reason, right? Um, all I could find was, we're listed in which episodes and those kind of things. But on one of the places, it's called Million Podcasts. It's a pretty big directory site. So there's a list: best 100 martial arts podcast, right? So not top, but best, right? You want to, well, as a matter of fact, so this is martial arts just across all genre, right? So number one is one called UFC Unfiltered with Jim Norton and Matt Serra. I don't know either of those people, but there's that. Um, the next one after that is the Strenuous Life podcast. Whistle Kick Martial Arts Radio. They're in third place. They actually reached out to me. I don't know. I think last year. I'm going to have to touch base with them again because we were discussing me writing an article or more for something they have in that direction, and then also being interviewed on this particular thing. So anyway, that's 1, 2, and 3, right? So I mean, it's a wide variety of things, right? On this particular site, why am I scrolling? Things not happening here. Out of 100, drum roll, please. We're number 26. So,
wow,
yeah, not bad, right? Not bad. I don't think it's bad,
yeah.
considering the shows that are on here. Like there's the Aiki Dojo podcast, Karate Built Martial Arts, Caged In. I mean, there's a bunch of mixed martial arts stuff, and then there's one called Punch Kick Choke Chat. That's hard to say. Say that 3 times fast.
That one I've actually heard of.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so teaching martial arts by combat learning. There's all kinds of stuff, right? So again, the list is best 100 martial arts podcast, and we are 26th on that list. So that's pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool. Let me move to another one here. Also on Million Podcasts, they have a separate list that is called Best 50 Armed Self-Defense Podcasts. Let me just tell you, on this list, there is a butt ton of like combat and defensive handgun and shooting things, that kind of stuff, right?
Sure.
Number one on this list is Active Self Protection Podcast. You've heard of that one.
Mhm.
Gun Freedom Radio. What else? There's one here in German. My German is so rusty, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it right. But Gun Talk, Concealed Carry, American Warrior Show, that kind of stuff. Okay. So, but this is Best 50 Armed Self-Defense Podcast. We are number 3.
Number. That's awesome.
That's freaking awesome, huh? Yeah. Number 3. And again, yeah, we only have 6 reviews. So, like Active Self Protection Podcast has 507, and the one after us, the one from Germany, I don't even see any on that one. But the gun talk and whatnot, 1,572. So that wasn't a consideration. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool. And then now this is a list, but this was actually done as an article on a the blog kind of reminds me of, or it sounds like they did a twist on like Inside Kung Fu, Inside Karate. Remember all those magazines? I don't know if they're
Yep.
still around, but it was Inside and then
Hmm.
whatever the branch was, right? Well, this one is called Inside Ninjutsu. Have you ever been to that site?
I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay,
Never really
so
seen.
they did an article on 5 essential podcasts for ninja and samurai enthusiasts. Okay. These are the top 5 essential ninja and samurai podcasts. And these are not ordered, they're not numbered. Okay. Um, they're just named. Okay. So, like Paul Massey's Ninjutsu in the World
Hmm.
podcast is listed on here. The next two are TV shows. FX's Shogun, the official podcast, right? One is called True Spies Espionage. So there was some mention among, CIA, FBI, MI6, all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff, right? So there must be historical things in there that make references to these other things. There's another one called Inside Ninjutsu, which must be by this same guy that does this blog. So it was nice that he buried his podcast at like the fourth listing. Um, some guy named Matthew Okuhara, also known as Gun Samurai. Don't know. Anyway, we're on the list, right? So we are, as far as they're concerned, one of the top 5 essential ninja and samurai podcasts. So that's pretty cool.
Okay. Awesome.
And then I went to Google and used their AI to I just the keyword phrase that I typed in was best Ninjutsu podcasts. Okay, and so it did its little scrubbing of the internet and all that. And while it didn't come back with any lists or things like that where it's numbered or anything like that.
Mm.
But it did find across references, um, threads, social media things, whatever, right? Um, the most recommended podcast specifically focused on ninjutsu is Kuden, martial arts, self defense, and survival. That's cool.
Makes sense.
What's that?
Makes sense to me.
As well it should. I appreciate your non-biased input there. That's funny. Anyway, I wanted to share that because this isn't. I mean, obviously, you and I do a lot of hard work with this stuff, um, but this is also folks that are obviously referring us and whatnot, and so um, while I do try to track the data because if people are leaving comments and I filter out the trolls and the ones who think they're being helpful but they're not, and then I look at the ones who even the constructive criticism like um, uh, I don't agree with that. As a matter of fact, now this is not a Kuden thing, but uh, Terrence, I don't know when he did because I'm just getting back from a two week hiatus to do that seminar in Syracuse, and then the wife and I were out of the country, being chased around by hurricanes. So, but a clip was pulled out of I don't know where, a class, a seminar, something like that, and so it's titled uh, referencing the naginata, right? But what I'm using in that video is a Picento,
Hmm.
okay, right? And so somebody I tracked him back. Actually, somebody got on there all flaming and stuff like that, right? But they're at least somebody that like has martial arts videos and they specialize in the naginata and whatnot. So I'm going to respond to that comment with a "You're absolutely right." You know, well, go ahead and change that. Right? It's in the same realm, but you're absolutely right. That thing that's whatever. course, he took it a little too far that like I should not make videos if I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So it was just a mislisting. Do you know what I mean? But I try to pull the constructive things, like, that thing was really great. I got a lot of value out of that, that kind of thing, because that helps me work with certain topics or know what folks are interested in, and maybe segue to something else, those kind of things. But it is, it's really hard to track it. It's really hard to get through all that chaos and mess, right? There's no really good single sources, especially for really small, like micro niches, right?
Mm.
For big things, if we were in the realm of finance or entrepreneurship or whatever, right? I mean, shit, Newsweek, Business Week, Forbes, all those kind of things are constantly doing articles on best of and whatnot. So those people are doing a lot of work. But I don't know if anybody's ever done this, but if you were to now, I have access to Google's keyword research tool and whatnot. It's part of AdSense, and people can like buy ads and tie into certain things or whatever. I don't use it for that. I use it for data collection. And so, if you were to type in karate or karate training or whatever, right, you're going to see that there are like hundreds of thousands, if not over a million searches per month on that search term, right? Contrast that with Bujinkan, Taijutsu, Bujinkan, Ninjutsu, whatever, right? I mean, then you're down into the low thousands or whatever. I mean, I know everybody likes to think that like we're the bomb diggity or whatever, but um, you have to recognize that most people cast a big net, and we really are kind of a niche out of things, and aren't the numbers in Ninjutsu and Budokan Ninjutsu, Naruto notwithstanding, are still even lower than like if somebody did a search on Aikido or Jujitsu or whatever, right? So a little messy and a little chaotic in trying to put these numbers together, right? But to find out that we're on lists for armed things, right? And so high on the friggin' list, right? And then being in I mean, just outside the first quartile, yes, quarter of that best 100. That's pretty freaking cool. So, yeah. Anyway, helps to not. I do this because I'm a teacher. I mean, I like doing this kind of thing. And in all honesty, for those who don't know this, James and I talk about this every so often. Um, Most, not all, but most, right? I'm James, like 90, 95% of the students we get into the what we're now calling Ninpo Mastery and Ninpo Elite programs, our inner circle programs and whatnot, right? Come from people who like literally binge watch episodes, right? That's in their first communication or in the initial free coaching call that we do,
Right.
to see if anything fits. So they binge watch this, they binge watch Whiteboard Wednesday, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, this is a way to kind of narrow the playing field, get the tire kickers out, the people that just want to be entertained by martial arts demonstrations and another technique, another technique, another technique. So that was, it was a cool boost today to see that we're not as obscure as I could feel like we are some days. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this at episode 200. We're coming up on episode 300 pretty freaking soon. That most podcast, considering that the person didn't just do one, it didn't go viral and they called it quits, because there's a shit ton of those, right? But what was the average number that most podcasts don't get past? 9 or 10, something like that.
Yeah.
Was that 10?
Yeah.
And then it significantly drops off after that, right? So to have almost 300 episodes, I mean, I know we're not, Joe Rogan and whatever, but that's pretty cool. So anyway, Huge thank you to everybody else who's kind of checked in on a regular basis and kept us where we are. So I don't know, maybe all that jibber jabber and whatever gave people time to sign in and whatnot. So anybody else besides Mari that signed in?
Trinity checked in.
Trinity, well, made good time. She was at the dojo the other day and helped me with a new youth intro today. That was he's a good kid, but that was painful. So, not painful. Well, I guess it could be physically, but not because of martial arts and physical activity. Um, anyway, so cool. All right. So let's do this. We'll just jump back in. James, do you have anything else to toss in? Because you, in all honesty, you follow a lot more of these things than I do. One, I don't have the time to do it, and two, I don't follow other podcasts to see what they're doing or whatever. I mean, this is my voice. This is right. We discuss things just like if we were in the dojo. I mean, this is
Mhm.
yeah. So, but you follow way more of these things. Um, how does that how does finding out where we are make you feel, other than like as it should be, right? Your little biased comment there, right?
I haven't actually checked anything like ranking wise or anything in quite a while on any of it, and um, yeah, I mean it's somewhat a little surprising, I guess, because it kind of feels kind of small and everything, but depending on some, and I listen to other ones, but that's only because by nature of most of my work, I can listen to something while I work on
Yeah,
earbuds, whatever.
yeah.
So I figure I can kill two birds with one stone, kind of thing. And usually they're different topics and whatnot. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Like I said, I've listened to some bigger ones and everything, and like we said, in relation to other podcasts like Rogan or Jocko or Tim Ferriss or any of those
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
It's
I
just
catch some of those here or there. I'm not the
yeah.
binge watcher kind of thing. I tend to
I scrolled through looking for interesting interviews and topics, and
yeah, and see, I'm minor based on research where I'm doing my own study, and so I'll do a search on something or whatever, and when those things pop up, they either go into a queue for me to kind of catch up on, um, or I'll listen to it then, or I'll catch a snippet or two of a highlight and then decide whether or not I'm going to listen to the whole. But I mean, it's across the board, right? Everything from uh, health and nutrition to
mhm.
you know uh, the crime things. I mean, and the podcast things across the board. I think the stats I just saw was at 24%, so almost a quarter of all podcasts are are centered around discussions about or opinions about or whatever on crime. Jesus Christ, I didn't realize it was that freaking big. I mean, um, but there it is, right? So, but we are in the self help and like wellness category, and I
Mhm.
know a lot of people don't like to think about that, and it pains me every time I set up uh, like the YouTube side of things, right? When we plug things through this service that we use called Restream, that simulcast this stuff to you guys on these different platforms. Um, then I go back and refine like the YouTube one because that's where it's going to reside, right? I mean, uh, forever. Um, so there's this category, right? I think we best fit in the how to and style category, not style like martial arts style, but the how to, right? Because it's personal development and training and stuff like that, right? But after doing some other research and whatnot, apparently everybody's searching in the sports category, but it just makes me grind my molars to click on the sports category, right? So I I split the difference, right? I don't necessarily alternate every other time or whatever, but anybody wants to, see how things pop up, do a search on categories and do a search on how to and style, and you're going to find way more of our listings over there than you're on sports, because it's only been in the last couple of months that I actually started clicking on sports, because it's not a fucking sport, right? But, and again, if folks in ninjutsu, if that's the thinking and that's what they gravitate to, um, and I'm not here to tell anybody what. I mean, what matters to me is where people are looking. So, I'll click on the damn category to identify things, so the algorithm gives it to the people who are looking for it. But again, even those categories are messy as far as we're concerned, right? There's no good fit, right? There's no personal development, empowerment, those kind of things, right? And that's really what this art's about. Because the more we think about it just being a martial art instead of a life mastery system with a martial aspect, right? Because what this art's really about is giving you the lessons to create the life you've always wanted to live, or at least more of that kind of life. And then the fighting system, now it has a place, it has a purpose, right? It's those skills necessary to protect that life you've created from anything that might threaten it. Otherwise, it's just something else to do, right? It's another hobby, pastime, interest, whatever. Okay. I actually have a quote from Nagato Sensei about that very thing. Right. So anyway, but it's pretty cool, yeah. I mean, because we're on consistently. I mean, I know was it just last week? Did I only miss one? I mean, I two. Okay, yeah, and I don't like missing them. Right, consistency is a huge key, not just to keep us out there, um, but I also know that given enough, and it's not very much. When I say enough, it's not very much. Given enough time, right? People will fill in that empty slot with something else, and now you've got a whole different uh, habit pattern set up. So interesting. So, but cool. I thought I'd share that with everybody, you specifically. But yeah, yeah, good stuff, right? So, but that armed one, that armed podcast thing, that really threw me, right? Because I didn't expect to end up there. Um, Even though, I mean, we touch on firearms and stuff like that, but it just number three, holy shit, right? So anyway, that being said, um, any comments or questions or whatever before I roll into things? I'll bring up my notes and.
No, I don't see anything.
Okay, cool. All right. So if you were on when I was kind of going over the the initial premise for this episode, right? The gist being that there's a big difference between reading the lessons of Nidsu in books or in articles, or uh, watching the videos on YouTube or wherever, right? Or even being in class or going to a seminar, Taikai, Daikomi Osai, whatever, and hearing Hatsumi Sensei or the other master teachers teach these things, right? There's a huge difference between knowing those things, remembering the lesson, and actually living them. Okay. And like I said, unfortunately, there's far too many people that or who can recite the philosophy, who can recite the life mastery lessons, right? Who know the right words. But if you were to see them or interact with them either out in the world or during a break at a seminar, yeah, cognitive dissonance is a big word that means they're not living to them. Okay. So, in a minute here, I'm going to fulfill a promise I made at the beginning, where I'll talk about something that happened at a seminar that I attended a bunch of years ago. that one really drove this home, but specifically why it was so painful for me to witness, so much so that I had to leave the room. I just literally just, it was such a contradiction to the way I was taught by those teachers, Hatsumi Sensei in the Hayes camp, Shoshi Malmstrom or whatnot, that about living Budo, right? Living as a warrior and walking into that discussion. And there was at least a dozen people in this particular conversation. And they were just, it was like watching a really bad tennis match where they were just lobbing uh, bullshit around. That, because maybe I was just deluded. Maybe I was just under the impression that everybody got the lessons and everybody was working on that particular thing because there was such a big push. There was such a big, such a huge effort when this stuff was introduced to the West to differentiate this from just the everyday martial art, so that people didn't fall into the belief that it was just another style option kind of thing. But here we are, 2025. So, that gap is what we're going to tackle today. Okay. And again, like I said earlier, if you get value from these things, don't forget to like and subscribe, and again, all those things depending on the platform that you're on. Okay. So, speaking of that gap, right? One of the big reasons it exists for so many students is because their training feels messy, disconnected, even chaotic, right? They grab a little here, a little there, but it never really fits together in a way that gives them a sense of confidence or control or the connections that make all the difference. Okay. And for a lot of these folks, the reason is because something critical is missing. Okay. And if you stick it out, right, get to the end here, I'm going to share a resource, right, that I created to solve that problem. A way to take all the random pieces and finally see, I don't know, we'll call it the roadmap, right? So again, stick with me, right? Hang on, because we will get there. And I think it's going to change the way you see your training, right? But for now, let's jump into this, right? So I really kind of fought with what I was going to title this this episode, right? And I settled on one. You guys have seen the creatives and stuff, right? But an early title, and it's really the theme, right? The theme is really centered around enduring chaos and training the invisible. And at one point, and you'll see, because it's in my notes here, that I call this the invisible kata. It's not that I'm talking about like a preset form, right? Kata itself means, it can mean form, it can mean example, it can mean model, it can mean a structure or whatever, right? These formula, these frameworks, right? That you're more likely to find on the Makimono, where the philosophy is for any given lineage or whatever. Most people tend to gravitate toward the densho, right? The list of techniques, right? It's the shiny toy in the box. Okay. And I get it. I do. I get it. Right. But we all need to ask ourselves, right? How many physical fights were you in this week? Okay. Now contrast that with how many arguments or emotional conflicts, whatever, right? How many, I don't care if it was a pushy salesman, it was fucking loud coworker that you can hear all the way across the damn shop that, through your hearing protection, or it's the family member who is insistent that it's their way or the highway or whatever, right? Um, you worked hard on a plan, or you put this thing together. You're going to do this thing the next couple of days or on the weekend or whatever, and next thing you know, there's not just one bump in the road. Somebody threw a monkey in your wrench, so to speak, right? Um, way more often, way more often, and this is what was taught early on. Yes, we're doing the physical stuff, but you know what? It takes longer to master the physical skills than it does some of these other things. Okay. Um, James, you've been through the instructor training program that we have, right? Um, which I should probably offer that out because that's one of the biggest things lacking across the martial arts in general, and specifically in ours, because everybody either tends to just regurgitate what what their teacher taught them. Um, but either way, right? So you've been through it once, twice, three times. I don't know. You've
At
been through
least
this.
twice.
Yeah. One of the earliest lessons that I take people through is I have them define skills and character traits of a leader.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because that's what martial arts instructors are, right? And so everybody kind of like tosses these things out and I write them down and whatnot. You remember these, right? And then we revisit each one of these and we decide, look, is this an attitudinal skill, right? Or is it a hard skill, right? Like hitting somebody in the neck with a shuto is a skill, right? It's a hard skill. Um, Attitudinal skill, something different, right? Or an attitude, yeah, a perspective, a focus, or whatever. You remember doing this exercise, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what do we have at the end of this thing, right? We have a board that's at least 75% like marked with an A for attitude, um, and maybe 20-25% that's marked with an S. And I say 20-25% because there are some that are both, right? There is a hard skill to it, but there's an attitude that
Sure.
goes with it as well. Yeah. So, but the point of all that is like everybody's focusing on hard skills, but the attitudinal skills are actually the quickest to change, pick up, and practice and get good at, or at least to hone the ones you already have way faster, right? Um, like you don't need to go to a dojo and you don't need a training partner to practice zanshin or fudoshin or whatever, right? Um, and you really should be practicing those things all the time because um, this is an everyday thing, right? If somebody can't regulate their emotions on a daily basis, how the hell would they think that they can do it when somebody's trying to beat, break, or kill them? Right? I mean, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just the odd one out. Now, James, you're not. Well, if I'm the odd one out, then you're the odd one out too. So that doesn't make us one, then does it? Anyway, all right. Um, so uh, the point or the premise of this episode is going to cut a little deeper than usual. And some of you guys are used to this because you've been around following us for quite a while. So, but it's going to be one of those episodes, right? Not because I'm going to be like stern or aggressive or anything like that. It's just ego doesn't like topics like this. Okay, but it's gonna be what it is because we're going to talk about something that I've noticed, right? Painfully, in fact, among martial artists and even among people who call themselves warriors or warrior aspirants, whatever, right? And that's the difference between knowing about the lessons of Ninjutsu and actually living them, right? So let me tell you about that story, right, that I mentioned earlier. Okay. So I went to the seminar. It was actually rather close, right? It was thrown by one of my peers. He's actually been in the art longer than me. Actually, he's passed away long since now, um, but it was close. And he was having one, and I got invited, so I went. Right. So besides the fact that the guest instructor who lived and trained in Japan, which was the big draw for everybody, right? Um, he was also a fucking alcoholic and got plastered last night with a bunch of the other students. And the seminar started 2.5 hours late because they couldn't get a hold of him. Finally had to go to his hotel, bang on the door, and he showed up looking like shit. Again, something I was absolutely not used to, right? Because I was raised in this art to be, to carry myself and to think and to live as a professionally minded individual. And I don't mean stuffed shirt, that kind of thing. This is a mindset, right? To live and to carry oneself with a certain presence and awareness and these skills, right? So we'll not discuss that anymore. But the point here is that in that interim, right? I mean, it was probably, I mean, once we were late, right? I mean, it was some of our stuff was supposed to start at like 9, something like that, maybe. Yeah, I think so. For us to not start until almost 11:30, that was fucked up. Anyway, and nobody stepped in to like do interim kind of things because there's been times in Japan, right, based on Hatsumi Sensei's health and whatnot. I mean, you know, you hit those years where you spend more time in a fucking doctor's office than anything else, even if you're just getting checkups. And so sometimes he would be running late for a class, right? One of these Tuesday classes, Friday classes, not Sunday classes, but he'd be running late because he had one of these appointments, right? But after we got to, let's say, a quarter after the hour the class was supposed to start, maybe not even that long, 10 minutes, right? One of the senior students, or master teachers or whatever, would take it upon themselves to start class, jump out there in the middle, and get people training. And then when Hatsumi Sensei would show up, right, we would finish what we were working on, and then he would take over and run it from there, right? I mean, just right. It wasn't like, well, he's not here, so like, I don't know, right? I mean, this is all part of being a leader and accomplishing and being mission focused, things like that, right? I mean, the things that warriors are supposed to be good at, right? But I don't know. We got past the 30-minute irritation point, whatever. 45 minutes. I'd done plenty of stretching, solo sanshin, networked with some new people because I really didn't know anybody in that group other than the guy running the thing. And he was busy trying to find the guest instructor who was supposed to be teaching us all about the magic of training in Japan. Apparently, sake and beer is high on the list. Anyway, so I wandered toward the house because that's where the anybody need to go to the bathroom. We were literally going into this was on this guy's property, right? House, barn, whole deal, right? And I walk in, and there's a bunch of conversation going on in the dining room. Big old table, right? At least a dozen people sitting around this thing, some standing, probably more than that. And what I walked into was nothing but bitching and complaining about the shit that they were going through in their lives, and not from a problem solution kind of thing. It sounded like I walked into the break room at some place where people resentfully work but hate their job and whatever, right? It was, to say it was painful, to say it was a shock to my system was it's an understatement. Okay. Because what I heard wasn't warrior talk. Okay. It was complaint after complaint after complaint. What they could have done, should have done, what wasn't fair, why things didn't or weren't working out for them. It was painful. physically painful, mentally painful, right? I had to leave the room. I spent a while before we did physical training just trying to get my head wrapped around that. I'm like, how the hell did things, like the most important things in the art, the things that we're living and using every day to be this thing, warrior, ninja, whatever term you want to use, how did that miss that many people? Well, that was over 2 decades ago, 2.5 decades ago. I don't ask that question anymore. It's still painful, but I don't get involved in those things. Right. And it's not because I was different to start. I was not. I was one of those people. But between the tip of the boot love and the lessons in how to reframe things so that I could rewire my brain, I could rewire my system to go from victim mentality to warrior mentality, right? Because from day one, I wasn't taught to be a victim. I wasn't taught to make excuses. I was taught that ninjutsu was about surviving life, not just training in the dojo. And in that moment, when I was in that freaking room, I realized something. A lot of people confuse memorizing techniques with becoming warriors. But warriors don't whine. Warriors endure. Warriors adapt. Warriors live differently than everyone else. Okay? Am I saying that we're better than everybody else? In some ways, yeah. In other ways, no. We're exactly the same as every other human being trying to figure this thing out called life and trying to get a handle on this one particular area called not dying or making or protecting our loved ones and things like that, right? For some people, it's, the government or the police should do it, but so in most cases, no, we're exactly the same as everybody else. But in the places that matter, when chaos and shit happens, yeah, yeah. And what's painful is to watch people who are supposed to be doing or becoming that being fucking average. So anyway, that was my story. Okay. So Nin, right? This we all know Nin, right? Enduring, persevering, those kind of things, right? But it's not just like enduring like physical pain and those kind of things. It's a part of it. But what I want to talk about is endurance beyond what most people think of as pain. Like you get hit and keep going. You get shot or stabbed and keep going, right? Unless something vital is disconnected, right? And I think that's the omote. That's where most people think, right? Before I dive into that, James, any questions, comments, complaints? Anybody else say hi?
Jimmy and Dave both checked in.
Cool. All right. See, it's the regulars. It's our peeps. All right. So let's just jump back into this endurance beyond pain thing, right? This brings me to something Hatsumi Sensei and Takama Sensei both hammered home. Okay. Takama Sensei once said the essence of ninjutsu is perseverance. Well, duh, we know that, right? But to what extent, right? What he said was the essence of ninjutsu is perseverance, to keep going when others quit. Okay. I mean, we know what happens if you quit in a life or death situation. You fucking just die, right? But what other things do people quit on a regular basis, right? Relationships, jobs, plans, goals, dreams, right? And Hatsumi Sensei said, Ninjutsu is not about winning against others. It's about winning against yourself, right? Think about that. Winning against your fear, right? Winning against your excuses, winning against your tendency to collapse or to escape when things don't go according to plan or to have a fucking anger management meltdown, right? Um, but here's the thing, right? Because life isn't neat. Life is messy. Even the best plans hit chaos, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be. I've got multiple warrior tomes from the Babushi to a bunch of these things, right? Um, that somewhere in all of them have something to the effect that even modern warriors say it today, right? All plans fail with first contact with the enemy, right? And I get it. It's human nature. It's human nature to try to subjugate nature itself, right? The laws of nature, right? To want enduring comfort, to want smooth sailing, all that. I get it. It's just not the way it is, right? It's just not the way it is. Right? In Mikyo, one of the first things that students learn and have to get a grip on is that those lessons, this is not about some deity coming to save us or whatever. I mean, you can have those things, right? You can, go to church on Sunday and practice Mikyo, well, all the time. But if you need, to have this thing about where you're going to go after and that kind of thing, right? That's fine. But Mikyo points to that the fact that like Siddhartha Gautama, right, the Buddha, because Mikyo is just this continuation of what most people think of as Buddhism and whatnot. He didn't teach a religion, and I know people use that term, right? He didn't teach about where you're going to go after you die. He didn't teach about um, uh, being a good person. Of course, you end up being that most of the time. But what he taught about was the human condition. Okay. These are enlightenment teachings from the perspective of a human being, right? Not from an amoeba, not from whatever. Okay. And life's messy. Okay. For instance, there's got to be a better way for a human being to come into the world other than being squeezed out of the cookie tube of life, right? Air hitting fresh, untouched membranes in the lung, burning like hell, that causes a baby to scream out, right? Or their mom being cut open so that they could be pulled out, right? Freaking mucus everywhere. I've been there for several of my kids' births, right? There's got to be a better way, but there isn't. Right? I'm sure scientists are working on it, right? There's got to be a better. There's got to be a better way to go out from this life than confused and completely forgetting everybody that you know, or the system breaking down and being in constant pain until it finally turns itself off. Guess what? Or being broken or mangled or what? There isn't, right? So this is the realm of the warrior. Okay, this is where Nin lives, not in avoiding chaos, but in enduring it, handling it, right? Or to put it another way, Nin is not just enduring pain. It's enduring life when it gets chaotic, when it gets unpredictable. Yeah, when it gets unfair. Right? So it's understandable why since the late 70s, late 80, early 81, when I got involved in this stuff, that it's changed so much, that it went from all of these lessons and the martial skills that we think of, but these are all martial, right? Martial means warfare, right? So, we're not just battling guys with knives and guns and shit like that, but we're, in the words of one of my teachers, we're battling the dragons of ignorance and desire, right? Anger, fear, all those kind of things. Right? This is a path of becoming something that can walk through the shit and come out stronger on the other side. Right? So, anyway, in a minute we'll talk about this thing that originally I called invisible kata. We'll kind of frame that a little bit. But James, anything? Questions? Comments?
Dave just said, "Beam the baby out, Scotty."
Beat the baby. Thanks, Dave. Anyway, all right. So this ties directly into what I call the invisible kata. Right. Most people see kata as a series of moves, A to B to C, but that's just the surface. It's the omote, right? It's the outward reflection of the principles and concepts, tactics and strategies in action, in real time, right? As a quote unquote form, kata, right? Structure. But again, this is the way we looked at kata way back in the day. That very quickly changed. Because again, it's easier for folks to hold on to something that's easy to measure. It's easy to say, oh, yes, that is the right way to do it. Everything else is wrong. It's easier to work on these external physical things so we don't have to feel, we don't have to uh, battle our own dragons, and we certainly sure as hell don't want to do anything that's going to crack the facade or cause it to fall away so that other people see those weaknesses. I mean, that's ego's job, right? To protect us from pain and hardship and reliving things and whatnot, but also, right, to maintain the image, right, of what we want to be known as, right, no matter how fragile that is. But conflict is conflict is conflict. Okay. So what's invisible, when I talk about invisible kata, what's invisible is the lesson hidden underneath that form, right? What I was taught, many things, right? But with reference to kata, kata are potentials based on things happening. Because there's lots of lessons. And they're over in the Makimono. They're not in the Densho, right? The Densho were created from that other stuff. They're reflections of the strategies, tactics, perspectives, philosophy, ideology, and all that of any given lineage. Right? So they're potentials in any given moment. Right? This is how the basics, the foundational things, both physical, right? Kamae, movement, whatever, right? And perspective, strategy, control, all that kind of stuff, right? Could play out. But one of the things that was really pressed in was that at its core, every kata is teaching you how to make sense out of the chaos. because warfare is pretty fucking chaotic. Okay. It's not like I think most people still envision shit because of, camera angles and war movies and all that kind of stuff, right? But still, much like our the battles of our American Revolution, right, and similar things, right, in other areas, and then those things even got carried into the Civil War. I mean, shit, less than 100 years later, right, after doing guerrilla tactics and shit like that, right. Everything went back to lining up across from each other and throwing fucking volleys of bullets and cannonballs and shit at stationary targets. Okay, so much for lessons learned. But I think that's how people think about things, right? But it's chaos. Even if it does start that way, holy shit, right? People running for cover, people that have a body part blown off or a hole in them or whatever, and they're not dead. They're screaming their ass off, right? They're screaming in pain. They're screaming, help me. And they're your friend. Anyway, I'm going to get off that topic. So, without this understanding, right? Without the makimono, the scrolls of principles, strategies, concepts, right? The Densho techniques look no different from karate or any other fight school. I know that in appearance it looks different, but in essence, just moves, just kata. This is what people tend to light on. And this is a beginner mindset, right? Oh, well, this style, because it looks different from that style, right? Okay, that's how you tell the difference between the two. That's karate. And yeah, well, 100 years or more ago, right? What we're practicing in the Bujinkan was called karate. Because that was the trendy term of the time. Another point in history, it was called jujitsu. Another point in time, it was called something else. Because they were just the terms that people used. Right? The term ninja is rather new. Right? It's people that with this target that we're aiming for, right? Shinobi no mono. But they were also called kusha. They were called kage. They were kan. Right? All kinds of different names. Right? Because those names pointed to some aspect of them or whatever, right? But again, this is I'm only speaking from my study, my experience, things I got from my teachers and whatnot. I compared to the master teachers and the new Japanese soke, I'm still a baby at this, right? I've only been doing this for what 44, 45 years, but that's what I've come up with, right? Without this understanding, right? Kata teaching you how to make sense out of chaos, right? There's invisible lessons in there, right? Without the makimono, the Densho techniques, again, I understand that the movement's different and it looks different and all that kind of stuff, but they're no different in essence from any other martial art that has kata, any other fight school. Okay? The invisible kata is what prepares you to deal with the things you can't see until they happen, right? The unseen timing, like the sudden shift in timing this person uses, the unknown terrain, right? The insistence of 100% training in a sanitized dojo. What I mean by that is flat floors, no obstacles, whatever, right? And again, there's times for that kind of training. But we don't know what the terrain's going to be like. We don't know what the environment's going to be like. Okay. And that's not even addressing the unexpected emotions that are going to pop up. Fear, anger, hesitation. Yours and his. Okay. Nagata Sensei once said, you must live Budo in your daily life, or it is just a performance. It's just an act. Okay, that's the invisible kata. It's not performance. It's the daily life training. Okay, one of my teachers used a example, right? And some of you guys have heard me use the same one. I'm just borrowing from this example that he used. If you've, in high school or if you went to university or whatever, if you ever went through a class, usually they're science classes, where you had classroom study and then you had a lab, right? Where you'd learn about something, then you go to the lab, and let's say it was biology, right? You learn, I don't know, the physiology of an earthworm, right? 7 brains, but they're 7 nodules that make up this brain thing, right? The shit I remember. Anyway, right? And so you learn about these things, and then the lab, then you're going to dissect an earthworm so you can actually physically see this stuff, not in the drawing, whatever, right? And understand, the actual depth of the meat of the animal, that kind of thing. Because if you cut too deep, well, then you cut the friggin' spinal cord. If you don't cut deep enough, well, you're not going anywhere, right? Or it could be a frog or whatever, right? It's chemistry class. You learn about these interactions, alkalis and acids and things like that. And then you go to the lab and you mix shit together. And it's supposed to turn a certain color, or you mix these things together and you dip a litmus paper into it and it's supposed to turn a certain color, whatever. It does, it doesn't, whatever. But it's this back and forth between them. Okay. And that just kind of reminds me, something I didn't put in my notes originally, but it popped in my head, and I'll talk about this in a minute. It's people's concept of what a dojo is. Okay? But what I was taught was, in that context, the dojo, whatever it is, I don't give a shit if it's your backyard or it's a physical place like I have or whatever. The dojo is the classroom. Life outside, that's the lab. That's where we're supposed to be trying out the lessons. See, pretty fucking difficult in 21st century to be trying out the physical fight lessons without risking going to jail or causing problems for your family or whatever, right? But what about all the other things? Fudoshin, Zanshin, Heijoshin, all these things. Well over half the stuff that I have in the Seishin Teki Kyoyo book. Yeah. So, again, it's the daily life training, right? It's practicing and honing our skills for what to do when things go wrong, when life throws curveballs, when chaos hits, and you still keep moving, right? I get it. Sometimes, like, it's shock to the system. Happens to me, right? Take some time. Let that chemical, electrical kind of reaction, right, to the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism kicking in, right? I mean, we don't want that to go away, right? The amygdala sends a message to the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus dumps a bunch of shit into your system, right? Shocks the cells awake. You transform, right? You got to let that pass, and then clarity returns, and then you assess the situation and create a goddamn battle plan, and you keep moving, right? Because that's what warriors do. At least that's what I was taught that warriors do, and it's worked for me so far. So here we are, right? But again, just in case people need the credibility from the other teachers, because I'm just a, Occidental trying to learn this Japanese thing, right? Nagata Sensei, you must live Budo in your daily life, or it's just performance. But then Hatsumi Sensei said similar things. Manaka Sensei said similar things. Tanamura, Sano Sensei, all these guys, right? They've just said it a little bit differently. Right? Way too many people. As a matter of fact, my first interaction with Shirai Sensei, where I went to a seminar he wasn't supposed to be teaching. That's a whole other story. Anyway, he was talking about this very thing, but the words he used was talking about how many people in the art had big kotsu bones, right? The word kotsu means bones, right? But the sternum is also called kotsu. But the word for ego, or one of the words for ego, is also kotsu. So the sternum in Japanese is very often called the kotsu bone, right? Which sounds like a play on words because it's already kotsu, but it's the big ego bone because the bigger the ego, the more that stands out, the more it puffs out, right? I've gone into combat with people like that. They ran around during training episodes or training. I hated fucking field training and stuff when I was in the army, right? I learned my lessons and stuff, and I endured the hardship, but I didn't sign up to be a grunt. So no offense to the grunts, right? We need you guys, by all means, right? But that's not what I signed up for. Didn't like the field duty. I went and did it, right? All these motherfuckers that supposedly liked field duty and stuff running around. Back in the day, there was the gonna kill a commie for mommy and all that kind of shit, right? Yeah. Well, next thing you know, we're on a C-130 heading for a tiny island down near Cuba called Grenada, and these are the guys that are praying and crying because it's all great, right? As long as the shit's not really happening. So, anyway, almost forgot. I was going to mention something about dojo. Again, how we define things puts us on a certain path. Okay. Most people, and we even have this in our curriculum, right? So for new people, right, that when they have their vocabulary, right, the translation we give them for dojo is a training hall, which is a conventional translation or meaning used in conventional martial arts in Japan today. Okay. It's a hall. It's a whatever, right? But hall is a kan. So that doesn't make sense. But if you look at the kanji used to write the word dojo, right? What it means at its core is a place where enlightenment takes place. Could it be a hall? Yeah. Could also be your backyard. Could also be your office. Could be wherever you're working on these skills: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever, right? The place where you're working to develop yourself, right, is a dojo. And it should be treated like one. Okay? One of the things that's helpful for people in the beginning is to have a dojo to go to, which is why I put a lot of effort into making mine look, smell, sound, right? Sometimes we play music. There's always a certain blend, or there's a couple of blends that we rotate through of incense, um, the artwork and stuff like that on the walls and whatnot, because I need to wake up the minds of the students when they come in. Again, another lesson I was taught by Hatsumi Hayes, a bunch of these people, right? That it wakes them up out of their, the words that were used for me were dull, sleepwalk living, right? It's not like any other place in their life. That's why we don't burn incense that people can get readily or have probably, use, or we don't burn incense that is sweet, or right, remind them of certain things, right, like cedar and those kind of things, right? Because it needs to wake up the mind. Um, it needs to do what it needs to do, right? But ultimately, any place, right? In Mikyo, we would say that dojo space, we're at the center of it. It's the mandala. We're at the center of it, and the mandala extends as far as we can see in all directions. And the thing is that when we move, we're still at the center of the mandala, What changed was what the edges look like. But we're always at the center of the mandala, and the mandala always extends to the horizon in all directions, and it's sacred space. Nothing in that space doesn't matter, doesn't not matter. I know it's bigger, right? So, anyway, what do I have here? I don't know. Questions, comments, James? Anything?
No, nothing right now.
All right. I either put them to sleep or I don't know. Who knows? So let me tell you another story, okay? Because ninja aren't only about enduring chaos. One of the reasons for enduring chaos is we use it. We don't just endure chaos, right? Sometimes we stir it up, okay? Because it allows us to recognize opportunities. Sometimes if you can't see the direction you need to go in or whatever, right? Sometimes you do something to cause a reaction that exposes openings, weaknesses, those kind of things, right? But if we are not capable of enduring it, the last thing we want to fucking do is trigger it. Okay? We're the one that needs to be stable and clear in that thing. Whether the universe created it in some fashion or we did. Okay? So let me tell you another story. A bunch of years ago, right? For those of you who are connected with the dojo and whatnot, this is way back in the days of Shiroshi Paul. And I think at that point he was probably just a Shodan or a Nidan because he was a Godan when he passed, I think. So years ago, we were in a local Halloween parade. Okay. So there was actually 3 locally that we used, and we used them to promote the dojo, right? We come up with like a guest pass kind of thing, and we make up a shit ton of these things. I think we give out, James, you've been in these things, right? 1,500 to 2,000 on average in each of the 3 parades. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Something like that, right? So what we do is the adults, sometimes parents help us and all that kind of stuff. We're passing out those things while the kids tossing candy, that kind of thing, right? But we're in uniforms. It's a free way to friggin' promote the dojo, except for one of the parades. I think it cost me like $10 because they count us as a business. So, but either way, shit, you can't buy that kind of exposure in a newspaper. So we would go and do these things, and during this particular one, we decided that every time the parade would stop, because it stopped in front of a judging stand and whatnot, so the entire parade stops. So every time it would stop, Shoshi Paul and I would do a technique, and it wasn't just a random technique. We injected the cool factor, right? So he was dressed in one of these faux armor pieces that Shiroshi Golem created. And like, if you were more than 4 feet away, you couldn't tell that it wasn't the real thing. It was really cool stuff. But what we did was a Kamayari versus a katana kind of setup, right? And we just did the same technique every time the thing stopped, right? The reason for that was because nobody but us was seeing that we were doing the same thing. Parade's moving, right? So why reinvent the wheel? Why anyway? So there was this one point where we're kind of getting set and we're doing a little positioning and whatnot, and a piece of candy flying over my head bounced off his helmet, and he immediately just starts to scan the crowd, and I went, "Don't worry about it, just go." right? And so he came with the sword cut, parried it, swept his leg, took him down, and I did what I normally do, and then just very quickly, right? I finished the technique, him on the ground, and then just instantly I spun around with the spear and moved in to this group of teenagers, right? Because when the candy bounced, they, that telltale chuckle of, oh, look what we just got away from or get away with, right? So I moved in really, really quickly and shouted, "Who threw the candy?" The kid who threw it thought he was safe in the crowd. But that sudden action, stirring chaos, made everybody else step back and point at him. He was instantly exposed. Right? So instead of lecturing or fighting, I handed him and his friends free passes to the academy and said, "Hey, tough guy, you look like you're cut out for this. Why don't you come to class?" Did he ever come in? Of course not, right? But the point is this, right? Ninja don't just survive chaos. When necessary, we create it when it serves our purpose. We disrupt patterns. We flip the script. Okay? A quote here in a little bit that I'll share from Hatsumi Sensei, but put that in a different area where he talks about this thing, right? About how we get an opponent, an enemy, to expose his plans, to expose his agenda. Okay. So, anyway, I'm going to tie this back to kamae as manipulation here in just a minute. But James, one more stop. Questions, comments from you, from them? I know you're the translator.
No, still nothing else.
All right. So, so let's do that. We'll talk about kamae here as a manipulation. Okay. It's another reason why kamae are so misunderstood. Because by and large, I know people are using the term kamae. They're translating his postures and things like that. But all it takes is just watching a little bit, right? People still operate as though they're still stances. And they wouldn't operate that way if they didn't think of them that way. And I know we can all argue because we have the words in our head, but this goes right back to the beginning of this episode, right? We can regurgitate the lesson, right? We can know the lesson, we read it, whatever. But are we living it? Okay. So, again, most students still see these things as just stances, as fixed poses. Okay? But kamae are tools of manipulation. They're weapons. To take kamae is to attack the attacker. You don't have to touch him physically, right? You're attacking their perceptions. You're attacking their plan, their agenda. Okay. Whiteboard Wednesday this week, I'm going to go into several of these, okay, and look at how they manipulate perceptions. They take control away from the attacker long before he ever realizes that he lost it. They're not just a place to start the technique from. Okay? The choice of the kamae happens before the thing comes in, because choosing any given kamae determines what he thinks he has and how he will attack. Okay. Just a couple, for instance, right? Seigan no kamae, right? That front hand and lead leg, they look like easy targets. I promise you, go spar with somebody in a different martial art. And as soon as you take a that ichimonji, or just like do a seminar and invite those people in, right? 99.8% of those people are going to go, well, that's fucking stupid, right? I can grab or hit your hand. I can sweep your leg, whatever, right? And just smile and nod, okay? Because just because they look like easy targets doesn't make them so, unless we think of those kamae stances, okay? Because they're bait, okay? They're positional control pieces, right? There's so much to these things, right? The lessons within the lessons, okay? In Hiro no Kamae, you look wide open, but that's the deception. Hiro no Kamae is like one of these freaking furrier's traps, right? Open these things up, put that bait in there, animal steps in, that kind of thing, okay? It makes the fool, right? The attacker who's a fool, who thinks, oh, you're wide open, makes him just rush right in, right? Makes the one you need to be worried about, that you should be cautious about, it makes him cautious. Because the way you use your eyes, the way, right? Is this guy a fucking moron? I mean, or is this a trap? The tactician, the strategist, right? The one you should be worried about. It makes him stall. Right? So you look wide open, but that's the deception. In Hoko no Kamae, Hoko no Kamae is very adaptive. It can look proactive. It can look protective. It can look defensive. Okay. It can look like you're about to smother the opponent. Give him a big hug. Right. Kamae could be used as walls, but they're not walls. They're traps. They're invitations. They're ways of shaping the opponent's perception so that you control the chaos. He creates and he does things, jumps around and does little psych outs and things like that, right? To get you caught up in the chaos, right? But if we're working on being able to endure and assess and stay in control, right? Fudoshin, those kind of things, right? During everyday life chaotic shit, then we should be better at doing that when some asshole wants to take our life. Because if not, I mean, if we get caught up when things don't go to plan, right, or we get lost, or we get frustrated, or whatever, right? If our default mechanism in life is to throw gasoline on the fire, well, shit, right? One of my teachers used to call that being an accomplice to your own ass kicking. And while he often said this about screwing up physical techniques, he also discussed it from the perspective of not having your mental shit in order, not having your heart in order, not having your, right? He said, if you screw this up, your family better look good in black. Okay. What's that saying from the Bible? The wages of sin are death, right? Sin, missing your mark, not staying focused. Okay. So here's that quote that I mentioned that Hatsumi Sensei said once. In true Budo, the enemy shows you his weakness. The ninja makes him show it faster. You can't do that looking at things the same way everybody else does, or being just ahead of panic mode. Okay? But again, right, in true Budo, the enemy shows you his weakness. The ninja makes him show it faster. That's what kamae do. They push the enemy into showing his weakness faster by making him believe something false or luring him into overconfidence. Right? And shifting through kamae, right? Or moving around in in Shizen, and then when he throws something, you only go to Kamae long enough to do the Uke-uch or the counter strike or whatever, and then it dissolves, or the little hit and run kind of move, and then you reposition in Shizen again or into some other Kamae. That's generating chaos in his mind. Okay? It's making his mind messy. Okay? But we don't get there. We don't learn to endure by throwing a fucking hissy fit or whatever you might call it where you live or whatever, so that other people rush in or they stop doing what they're doing or whatever because that's our default. That's not enduring hardship. Oh, and just so everybody's clear, I'm not perfect at this either. Right? On my wife and I's last little jaunt here last week, right? Um, to say that, and I truly do believe this to be true, to say that class has little to nothing to do with the size of somebody's bank account. Okay, I met some of the classiest poor people and some of the not so classy people with money. But what was painful for this last one was being in the presence of people who, I know they scraped all their money together and stuff like that, and they bought their tickets to be on this cruise. And now it's a great vacation. They're weighted on hand and foot. There's entertainment everywhere. They probably bought the drink packet, whatever, right? But to listen to these entitled fucks mistreating staff, acting, right? I know most of them resent, hate, whatever. The rich, the wealthy, those people who have power, those people that have things that they wish they had. But to watch these people who were in a position, right? They're the customer, right? In a position of power, looking just as bad, if not worse, than these other people that they hate. That was pushing a couple of buttons. And at one point, my wife had to make me laugh. We were at dinner, and she leaned across and she said, "Hey, come here. You've seen the movie Frozen with your daughters, right?" "Yeah, why?" And then she broke out into song. "Let it go, let it go." I couldn't help myself. But just the cognitive dissonance was strong in these. What would they say? The force is strong in this one? Yeah, all right. Well, the shit was strong in these. So let's tie it all together. Okay. So what do we have here? Right? Nin is about enduring more than pain. It's about enduring life's chaos. Okay. There's nothing wrong with trying to smooth out the bumps. There's nothing wrong with putting together plans. Okay. I have plans. Right. I have a daily to-do list, those kind of things. Right. But I also have plan B through Z. I didn't make up 26 plans. I have an ideal and a path, but I have skill sets, troubleshooting mind, and these other qualities where when shit like today was one of them, right? It wasn't chaos. It was that in the process of doing one thing, it led me to something else. And I realized, shit, I got to take care of that because of priorities. These other things are going to have to move back a little bit. So half my list got moved to tomorrow. Okay. What plan was that? B, C, D? I don't give a shit, right? It's the ability to adapt, to be flexible, right? To not get locked down, right? And an ex-wife, and I've met lots of other people in the world that were like this as well, but they would spend days working out a plan, thinking it through, crossing all T's, dotting all I's, being super satisfied that they had covered everything. But as soon as the first glitch happened, they caved. What I mean by that is, well, fuck, this is never going to happen, right? There's no way this is ever going to. Whoa, 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 whoa. What's the glitch? Is it something we can go over, go around? Or do we just like hold for a second and let the damn thing pass and then continue on? See, that's my forte. Dealing with obstacles. Going over it, under it, around it, through it. Be patient, let it go by, continue on. Okay? Because I try to live this art. Okay? But if we can't do it, life is our litmus test. The results that we get back is a reflection of how we're dealing with things. Our belief system, our troubleshooting abilities, our emotional regulation, all that. Right? So the invisible kata is training for what you can't see. As soon as I accept that, like, life is messy and plans, like, I can only plan and cover things based on the information that I have. There are things that I may not be aware of at the moment. There may be skills that I need that I'm not seeing. And like everything from nature to people. One of my students posted the other day about, we're subject to our karma and stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely right. Right. Create good causes. Right. The answer that you'll get good effects. That depends. Okay. That's the ideal. But we're not just subject to our own karma, okay? Our own cause and effect. There's also secondary karma. And that is the product of everyone else's thoughts, words, actions now and the people that came before them. And these things are all bouncing around, right? And they're going to intersect. Okay? So the invisible kata is training for what you can't see. Knowing that, I can develop skill sets that allow me to be resilient, that allow me to not be surprised. Manpan Fukyo, right? No surprises. Right? Sometimes, Hazumi Sensei's earliest book in the West here, Ninjutsu, History and Tradition. The translation in that book is no surprises for the ninja. But Banpa Fukyo is a Mikyo phrase. No surprises. Has nothing to do with you not being able to be surprised. Has to do with understanding that we can be surprised. So you're not surprised by being surprised, and so you don't drag out the shock and awe longer than it needs to handle. And then you learn things like no kamae and getting out of the space that you're in when you're surprised, so that you're not a sitting duck during that moment, that your left brain isn't processing the world. So you have a default mechanism to get out of the damn space you're in, so that if anything were coming into that space during that glitch in the system, that glitch in the matrix, you're not standing there. You don't do that by doing pretty kata. Okay. But again, training for what you can't see, right? What's not written down, what only life can test you on. Okay? Chaos isn't just endured, right? We're ninja. Sometimes it's weaponized. Right? And kamae art stances. They're strategies. They're tactics, right? They're tools and weapons that allow you to make sense out of the chaos. And they teach you how to manipulate the chaos. They're tools to allow you to get him to expose his weaknesses, his gaps, his plans faster if you know how to use them. Okay. And the bigger lesson, right? You can't learn this by memorization. You can't learn this by collecting techniques. You learn this by living it, by using it, life itself, like I said, as your laboratory. Because as Hatsumi Sensei said, Ninjutsu is not about winning against others. It's about winning against yourself. Right? And to kind of wrap this up, I talked about this earlier. Right? I mentioned it earlier. Right? For a lot of folks, their training is chaos. Lessons have been collected in a very chaotic way. They've had hints here or there about the order that things should be in or whatever, right? But there's a reason that we our progress stalls, or we stagnate, or we drift away from the training, or we keep doing the same shit over and over again the same way, and think that that's progress, or think that that's, it's not that it's not ability, right? But the hard question is would you bet your life on that particular technique or that particular mindset or whatever? Because that's what you're doing every time you or we or I, right, rest on our laurels, right? But if you're tired of the chaos, right, if you want a way to see progress in your training instead of just hoping for it or assuming it, right, then, you know, I'm going to suggest, and shameless plug here, right, that you check out the Done For You Blueprint, right? I can't remember the full name of this thing, right? But it's the curriculum and roadmap, right, that has allowed a lot of folks, right, to train like a black belt from day one, to have a sense of control, to have a sense of the ability to make sense out of the chaos, right? So these are the same workbooks that I made for my students a long time ago, right? There's one for everyone. And of course, our stuff is broken down a certain way, right? If you're training somewhere else or you're training on your own, you can use them any way you want. But these are designed to be stages and stepping stones and whatnot. And there's not just lists of skills and techniques in there. Right? There's little articles in there. There's little things about in certain books about the kamiza or this or that kamai, or there's tracking worksheets to help you track flexibility and those kind of things, right? So anyway, James, if you could drop the link in the chat thing, we'll definitely make sure that it's in the description. Okay, but again, the reason I'm saying that, and it's not just that this is not a slam dunk on students or whatever, right? The reason I'm mentioning this about chaos is because with everything contained within this art, there's a lot of shit. There's a lot of stuff, right? This can seem like chaos as well. Okay. So I call this a blueprint, right? Call it a roadmap, call it whatever you want, right? And the reason I call it a done for you is because I made up the frickin' here's a block of instruction. Here's techniques. Here they fit together. They're interconnected, right? At a certain stage for my students in the curriculum, they're learning the lessons. But then there's another stage where I have them go back and look at all the techniques that they just learned and see how they are either or decision making kind of things, right? If they grab this way, we're going to do this. If they grab this way, or if the punch comes this way, or if you shift into this angle or whatever, right? Here's the end answer for that. This one is the answer to this other one failing, right? That's getting my students to think strategically and not just memorize shit for the next belt. Because I'm here to tell you, most attackers don't give a shit what color belt you have. As a matter of fact, based on what they've seen in most martial arts and from most martial artists, they're not worried. So if you think that black belt is scaring anybody or impressing anybody, It is, but for the wrong people. Okay. So again, I put these things together so that my students don't just collect techniques. So you have a roadmap to make sense out of this chaos. I mean, 9 schools, 3 to 4 scrolls minimum per school, not counting the ones for each weapon in that scroll or in that school, right? And how they go together. And it's a lot of shit, right? So anyway, all right. So little reflection to close out, right? Here's my closing thought for today, right? The warrior protector isn't the one who avoids storms, or she, right? He, she, be equal across the board here, right? They're the one who trains to walk through them and come out stronger on the other side. Takuma Sensei put it even more simply. The essence of Ninjutsu is perseverance, to keep going when others quit. Just in case you forgot it when I said it the first time, okay? But the question is, are you training for chaos, or are you just training to look good in the dojo? I know it's easy to answer one way or the other. But what happens when something doesn't go right in our day-to-day life? Okay. Anyway, so again, we're back on track. I'm back from my vacation, all that kind of stuff. So this is the theme for the week, right? And it'll extend into Whiteboard Wednesday. So for this week on Whiteboard Wednesday, we're going deeper into some examples of this, specifically with the kamae. Okay, and probably going to stick with the ones that I already pointed out: Hoko no kamae, the embracing posture, Seigo no kamae, true or correct eye posture, maybe one or two others. Right? We're going to look at how these are more than defensive combat positions, how they're deception, control, and a way to weaponize apparent weaknesses. Okay, essence of Kujutsu Tenkan, right? Disguising truth and falsehood. And then Friday in our master class, we'll take this into the physical, right? Working some techniques, some drills, some tactics, and whatnot, to use exposure as a trap and chaos as an ally. Okay? So I hope you make it. I know my Nimpo Masterclass people will be there. My Shinobi Kai people will be there. But I hope you make it. Okay? Because again, the world doesn't care how many kata you've memorized. I know I don't. But it does care whether you can survive when the storm hits. Okay? So again, if you got value out of this episode, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, that kind of thing, right? James, any last questions or comments before I wrap this up? Oh, I know I heard a beep beep. Oh,
There it goes.
Are you still there? Oh, good. I heard. Did you get logged off at some point, or?
Yeah, it lost connection for whatever reason.
All right. As long as it didn't happen for me, and I was just like spending 20
No, you're
minutes
good.
to nobody. Okay. Anything?
No, sir. I don't see anything.
Okay, cool. All right. So again, if you got value, do us the favor, right? Like, subscribe, those kind of things. Either way, for some of you who are on earlier and you got a chance to listen in on like our position relative to other podcasts and whatnot, like I was blown away by finding out that we were like number 3 out of 50 and number 26 out of 100, top 100, whatever. Thanks for helping to make this one of the go-to podcasts out there for serious practitioners, right? And with that being said, right, we will see you next time. Trinity's already doing it in her head, right? We'll see you next time on KUDEN. Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.